From the lab to the headline, there's a smarter way to bridge that gap. Today, we're giving healthcare executives a practical game plan for talking to the media, how to translate complex results into a clear story, pick the right moment to share it, and earn the trust of people who shape your company's narratives. Stay tuned. We'll hear from the other side. Welcome to the Russo Edge. I'm your host, Solomon Wilcots. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on how biotech stories become headlines and how your team can work smarter with the press. Joining me today are two pros who live where science meets the front page. Heather McKenzie is a senior editor at Biospace. She's evidence first, known for her clear-eyed coverage across neuroscience, rare disease, and for tying data to real patient impact. Also joining us is Ben Glickman. He's a reporter with the Wall Street Journal, covering M&A, shareholder activism, and market-moving disclosures. Yes, including pharma and biotech. He brings a capital market perspective on valuation and governance. Ben, Heather, you guys doing well today? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Happy to be here.
Well, let's get started. I have a question. This is for both of you. For listeners who don't know you very well, give us a quick version of what you cover and how you decide what's worth your time on a very busy day.
Yeah, so I'll go first. At Biospace, we pretty much cover everything that is important to the biopharma industry. So to mid to senior level executives, we cover everything from regulatory to policy. That could be anything from the Inflation Reduction Act to the most favored nation, drug pricing. We've been doing a lot of that lately. To therapeutic breakthroughs. That's one of my favorites. And I love when we'll get to write about that. To M&A, which Ben would have a lot to do with. Yeah, so I'll turn that over to Ben.
Ben?
Yeah, I have much less subject area knowledge than Heather, but nonetheless, I cover M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and shareholder activism for the Wall Street Journal. I primarily cover deals on the smaller end. So for us, that's sort of below 5 billion, which I know in the general world is still pretty big. But I also just kind of have a general interest in the biopharma space. Obviously, there's plenty of deal making to go around within biopharma, whether it's, sort of reverse mergers at the end of the life of some biotech or, some big multi-billion-dollar deal by AstraZeneca or Pfizer or whatnot. So generally interested in the space, and I tend to cover things across the industry spectrum.
Well, that's really good stuff. And it's certainly a broad spectrum when you think about what you both cover. This is for both of you. What's the fastest way for someone to earn your trust when first making contact? And what's the one thing that makes you skeptical right away?
I would say the best way for someone to earn my trust is to answer my questions honestly and without a script. I think it's pretty obvious when someone is following a script if they don't answer my questions and instead answer my questions with a different answer to some other question. It's pretty obvious if someone is following a script that their company wants them to follow. And I know that people have to do that to a certain extent, especially in big pharma companies, because there are legal reasons and there are PR reasons. But you're just going to get a much better story out of it if you try to give as much information as you can while walking that line between what's good for investors and what's good for really getting the information and the data out there.
Being conversational really does go a long way, doesn't it?
It does, and it goes a long way to your company's reputation as well. I mean,
Yeah.
there's we wrote a story about this lately that the reputation for biopharma companies, they're known as the bad guy, and I think that's not fair, because because these are companies that are developing life-saving medicines. I mean, lots of cancers have become chronic in the past 2 decades, and that's largely thanks to pharma. And I think, it doesn't get recognized because of insane drug prices, which, I'll acknowledge are relatively, high,
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's lots of reasons for companies to be as candid as possible.
Ben, what about you?
I like the political nosedive we just took there into drug pricing. I would say that for me, because I'm not necessarily always covering biopharma, um, I would say a similar point actually, that kind of being conversational and talking in a more kind of naturalistic way, as if we're just having a normal conversation over a beer or something about what it is that this person does. I think that always makes a huge difference in terms of just establishing a connection, and something that, where the next time you meet that person, you're going to be excited to be talking with them because you remember that there was kind of a good connection there before. So conversational, being conversational, definitely. And then for me personally, I would say, like, being cognizant of, frankly, my limitations in terms of, I, write a fair amount about biotechnology companies, but I'm no scientist. I don't have a PhD. I also don't spend all of my time reading industry news. So people who kind of break down for me what they do in understanding that I am not necessarily the most knowledgeable about biopharma, it's always very much appreciated that people are kind of understanding where I'm coming from.
That's a really good point. And I guess that leads me to this: when, if ever, is an advanced conversation helpful to hit you, to kind of help you set the ground rules, right? A little bit up front for transparency. And just, when background conversations can also be very important to help you maybe get things the right way and set up the interview for greater success. That question is for both of you. Heather, how about you take it first?
I think it's always advantageous to have a background conversation, as many as you can, especially in areas that you follow quite closely. I mean, for me, that would be neuro. I've been talking a lot with companies who focus on Huntington's disease and ALS recently. Really, for the past few years, those are two main coverage areas of mine, and it often leads to a lot of serendipity, really, because maybe the source is in one area but they're looking at something else, or maybe the company is in one area but looking at something else, and then you find out more about their experience and their expertise, and it leads to a whole different story, and then you've got two stories, or you've got a story for one of your freelancers. And I think it's just always advantageous. And yeah, I think it also establishes those connections, because companies are always changing. People at the top are always changing. It's really, really important for us to establish that company tree, with all of the people who are in charge, both PR representatives and interview, and the executives. I think it's just I wish that there were 56 hours in the week so that I could do 8 more
Good
hours a week
Lord.
every week.
Yeah, Ben, those conversations could be very informative, correct?
Yeah, yeah, they could. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, I feel like to have a conversation to start out before there's anything on the record or anything like that. For me, it's really helpful just because I get to kind of walk people through how my job works
Yeah.
and what things we're going to be covering. I'll write a story about if this or that or the other deal happens, but I might not be writing a story about a licensing agreement, for example. So explaining sort of where I fit into this whole ecosystem, I think definitely makes the interview more. It just leads us to address things that are more relevant to exactly what I might be working on, whether that's like a trend story about biopharma deal making, or a specific therapy area that's been really hot. For I might write a NASH story right now with 89 Bio and Akiro. So like anything where I can kind of set the tone and help people understand how my role might be different from someone like Heather, who is way more in this world and understands it way better than me. Like, that makes the conversation much more productive, I feel.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, that's it.
So when you have that, say, that first call with the interviewee, Heather, and you could take this. This is for both of you, by the way. When you're on that first call, what do you need for that interviewee to maybe have in front of them so that they don't waste the time? Maybe it's certain data points or certain information. Maybe it's something from a news release that you need for them to really have so that it's a fruitful conversation when you're on that first call.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what kind of story we're writing. So I think if it's a data drop, like a major readout, I think the more data, the better. I mean, whenever I do a story really digging into a trial, like I was just speaking with one individual today who kind of picked apart the data from a recent big readout, and he said that he just really wanted more data from the individual patients, and he wanted more information on a specific biomarker, which the company didn't provide. And he said this was probably because the biomarker wasn't positive, which would influence the investors, which he understood. But just as much as you can kind of walk that line between what's good for the company and what you can actually share, I think that's important really to get that message out there through the media to the patients who are going to be reading this and to other companies who are developing treatments.
Yeah, I would say actually very different from what Heather said. I think that um, generally I'm looking for like the broad arc of a company when I meet with someone from that company. So the time when I'm going to be like most likely to jump in and be writing about that company is frankly like if they're acquired by a big pharma, um, or if they IPO or other deals kind of related to that. So to understand sort of the therapy area that a company is working in, what the actual mechanism of action is, sort of how they think that what they're developing is unique from competitors, like those kinds of broader overarching things tend to be really helpful from my perspective because it helps me kind of place it in uh, whatever kind of image I'm forming in my head of the broader ecosystem, which is just as important as understanding like a particular company from my perspective.
Heather, this question is for you. What is maybe the most common clarity gap that you see in trial news when it's being released, and how do you close that gap? How do you go about fixing it?
I think I'm going to just cannibalize my answer to that question with the last answer. Um,
Okay.
but I think the most significant gap we usually see is outside commentary
Yeah.
in press releases. So usually it'll be the trial investigator that the company will have comment for the press release, and that's great, but it's not exactly as outside as our audience wants to see. Like they'd like to see maybe somebody from a different academic institution who wasn't involved in the trial comment for a completely unbiased opinion. The other things are exactly what Ben said in his last answer, what it means for the industry. Like what it means overall, like place it in the context of the industry. And this would be not so much in the press release, but in a post interview or in the pitch when the PR representative is pitching it to us. I mean, I had this one early in my career. I had this one awesome PR person. She was a former journalist, and she would just basically write these pitches that would write like my story for me. And she was incredible. And she would put in like outside commentary. She would put in the context, and it was just incredible. And I took all of her pitches and ran with them.
Really good stuff. Ben, this one's for you. When you cover biotech, what ties the science to market value, and what context do you want up front for your readers to assess what's most important to assess that significance?
That's a good question. So I think that for me, I think a lot about kind of the commercial potential of the treatment, essentially. So in the same way that there are specific indications where we all understand that it could make whoever commercializes it a lot of money. That tends to be the thing that um, obviously that interests a lot of investors. and that interests me by sort of proxy. So commercial potential, and there's a lot of things that obviously are kind of connected to that. So whether there's some specific mechanism of action that makes it kind of unique from a manufacturing perspective, or really anything that speaks to why, from a top line, from revenue, some big pharma, or if they decide to go it alone as a maintaining as an independent company, like why the market is going to care about that in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah. Heather, you often cover science where the politics gets really loud, right? How do you want companies to engage with you in that environment?
Yeah, that's been a real factor this year in
Yeah.
2025, especially. I would say with transparency and as much transparency and honesty as you can. I mean, when you're covering a data story, honestly, it's not usually a problem. Companies don't want to get away from the data unless they're being impacted by the political environment, in which case they still probably won't say very much. But when they do, it is a terrific story because these are issues that are affecting our industry, and if they can be on, if they are honest about it, then you really get to dig into an issue that's having a considerable effect. Like we had one story that I wrote earlier this year where a company was affected by FDA leaks to the media, and this CEO I spoke with was very candid about it, and it led to an excellent story, and I think it was important to put out there. So it's not always a matter of that they should be avoiding politics. It's just a matter of kind of how you go about walking that line and balance.
Well, Ben, you cover activism. What early signals do you look at a campaign and see that it's gaining traction? And what responses from board members do you actually think about that will land with investors?
I think that the thing that tends to show the most is sort of stock price reaction, frankly. I guess this is activism, so it's always public companies. But when you see that this is clearly like by a stock jumping after some, regulatory filing goes out, that kind of thing sort of lets us know, like, oh, okay, this is clearly something that investors have strong opinions about. And from there, we often kind of try to seek out an array of perspectives from the investor community. So whether that's sell side analysts who are always happy to talk, or hedge funds, or larger money managers where they might be bio specific. They might have a specific kind of bio fund manager who is more likely the person who's going to have an opinion about it. We try to sort of gauge the room, I guess, and that's a big part of it. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, I think it does. I think it's a really good idea. And look, I know that coverage, it always morphs in certain areas, right? And so I want to get a prediction from both of you and just how much you think biotech coverage is subject to change over the next 12 months. What stories are we going to be talking about maybe 6 to 12 months from now? Where's all of it going?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, we're already in it. We're
Okay.
already in the cycle that we're going to be in the next 6 to 12 months.
Mhm.
Drug pricing. We've already had Pfizer and AstraZeneca go ahead and make deals with the White House. I'm sure that J&J has commented that they don't have a deal yet, but that they've been thinking about it since before day one. So I think that's going to be one issue. Weight loss is not going away. GLP-1s are not going away anytime soon. And then from just a media, like inside the media standpoint,
Mhm.
I think media outlets will have to be very careful that we continue to stick to the facts, even more so than usual, to
Yeah.
ensure accurate coverage in this really hyper partisan environment. And we'll also have to avoid burnout because this is, I think you probably agree, an unrelenting pace of news. It
Yes.
doesn't stop. Like it used to kind of be like, the spring we had a busy conference cycle, and then in the
Mhm.
fall we had a busy conference cycle and JPM. But other than that, there were kind of lull times. There are
Yeah.
no lull times.
No time to exhale at all, is there? Ben?
I agree that I think we're already partially in it. The other thing
Yeah.
I would highlight that is that that sort of has already a little bit started to take root is sort of the general sentiment about biotechnology as a sector. There were the first half of the year, it was very downbeat. I was at the bio conference and people were not feeling kind of like super joyous, I would say.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk about, how markets have been hit really hard, how private funding is not as available as a lot of people would like, how, generalist investors have flooded out of the sector. So now it appears like XBI has done really well over the last 2 months. So all of a sudden the coverage and we've had there's a herd on the street column from this week, I guess, that says this exact thing of, biotech's rallying again. And those kind of boom bust cycles, I think,
Yeah.
are inevitable, but it does feel like the fortunes kind of turning to the positive, more funding being available, less regulatory uncertainty. M&A pipelines have been super robust.
Mm.
And that kind of thing, I think, will continue, I guess, for the next year,
Yeah.
unless we've been talking about how unpredictable the news cycle is, unless there's some giant wrench that gets thrown in the machine, which
Yeah.
there very well could be. But that does seem to be a shift that I've noticed in the last month or two where that I would expect to continue and, sort of things turning back positive for the industry.
That's
Yeah.
if I jump
Go
in.
ahead.
That's something we've noticed too. I mean, yesterday there was a company that has a late stage weight loss therapy, and they got 600 million in a
Wow.
Series B. And then today there was a company focused on preventing or recovering hair loss, and they got I think 120 million or something like that, which is kind of surprised me for a company like that. I mean, is hair loss the new weight loss? Maybe. It's
Well,
surprising.
it's certainly a robust pipeline for news and information, and I'm sure you guys will be all over it. We want to thank you for the great information. Thank you to Heather McKenzie, Ben Glickman for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm Solomon Wilcots, and this is the Russo Edge. Thank you for joining us.